Hello and welcome to The Funding Blueprint, Unlocking Startup Success, where we talk about the specific defining moments in a startup's journey. I'm Cody Goff, your host, and today you're going to learn about the power of content marketing, yes, even for startup, and some tips on why you may not understand the actual value that your business is offering, along with some ways you can figure it out. Here to tell you about all these amazing things is my guest, Hillel Fuld. He's been named Israel's top marketer. He's a global speaker, a tech journalist, an online brand ambassador. He's worked with companies including Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Intel, Huawei, and more. Google referred to Hillel as a startup guru, and Forbes called him the man transforming startup nation to scale-up nation. Is there anything Hillel hasn't done? Well, let's find out. Here's our conversation. I think your LinkedIn profile currently lists something like 80 or 90 jobs. Is that about right?
I don't know. I didn't count.
That's good. Cool. Well, I just want to zoom in. So you've worked with lots of companies. You've advised startups. You've done a ton of stuff. Let's zero in on what are you bringing to the table? You have a specific point of view, right? Talk to me about one specific time where you were in a room with a startup. You told them to do something, or you maybe gave them a surprising piece of advice, and it really just helped them blow up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example of that is where it all started. My first tech job ever. I'm talking like 2011, I think, and it was a mobile advertising company, and they hired me as head of marketing. And the CEO calls me to his office day one. He says, we need to reach 10,000 developers. How are you going to do that? And he kind of, I guess, expected me to, performance marketing, SEO, PPC, whatever he expected. And I said, I'm going to start a company blog. And remember, early days, he's like, a company blog? I'm like, yeah, and I'm not even going to talk about ourselves on this blog. I'm just going to, build an industry blog. Long story short, within a few months, this blog started, appearing on leading websites right alongside, the leading publications like TechCrunch, The Next Web. And this blog, which, I would literally get to work every day, make a cup of coffee, and just write content about the industry, quickly started to sell more than the sales team. It really put the company on the map. The company ended up getting acquired for just short of $1 billion. And just to kind of be clear, I'm not implying that was because of me. Obviously, it was a great product, great team, great everything. But the blog definitely put the company on the radar. And again, that was super duper early days when not many people understood the power of content. But from then till now, everything that I've done in my career and any piece of success that I've had ties directly back to content of some sort. And so I guess that is the best example of how I kind of kicked off this model of leveraging and harnessing the power of content to build a brand.
When brands are starting out, they've got a lot on their plate. I don't think most of them think of content marketing as an essential function. Do you think it's essential for most startups or all startups, or is it, how overlooked do you think it is generally?
I think essential is the wrong word. I think it's mandatory. I think content is the foundation of the entire building, right? Because, if you produce really good industry content at scale, and again, I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about self-promotional content. I'm talking about industry content, right? The Red Bull model, right? Red Bull, doesn't talk about themselves ever. The word beverage is not even on their website. And so, when you pump out industry content at a high level at scale, everything you're going to do as you grow the company is going to become significantly stronger. Your social media now becomes stronger because you have content to share. Your SEO becomes stronger for obvious reasons. Your PR gets stronger because these journalists are going to Google you and realize you're a content producer just like they're a content producer. Your fundraising stronger, your biz dev strong. Everything is stronger when you have content. So I don't think it's essential. I think it's absolutely mandatory. And without content, your entire building comes collapsing down.
Is that universal? I mean, you work with a lot of tech companies, right? If I'm developing some tech application for a specific purpose or specific audience, even in those cases, you think it's universally applies?
100%. I think that this is a common mistake that I see amongst entrepreneurs all the time, which is, we're an enterprise company. We're not, this content thing and the social media thing, it's for B2C, not business to enterprise. And what I say to these CEOs is, you do realize that CIO that you're targeting at 5 o'clock in the afternoon goes home and becomes a consumer, right? So I think content, the tactics of how to produce the content, how to distribute the content might change per sector, but the fundamentals are the same.
What is the best type of content to produce to reach most audiences?
Interviews.
Really?
Straight up. Yeah, you interview someone, they share it, you get the traffic. Done. Finished. Like, that's it. I mean, listen, I've interviewed the craziest people in my career. I've interviewed Steve Wozniak, founder of Apple, Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, who invented the web browser, basically. Crazy people. And as soon as I interview that person, who, by the way, is happy to be interviewed because everyone likes to be on stage and everyone wants to send mom their interview, they go and they share it, and I get all that traffic. And I get the brand by association with that leader. So it's just an easy win-win, and it takes you 5 minutes to write 10 questions to send them by email. So there's literally zero downside and just tons and tons of upside. And I don't know why every single company out there doesn't conduct industry interviews. But, interviews, lists of people, again, you list people, they go and they share it. So it's such an easy, I don't even want to say hack because it's so obvious, but yet most people don't do it. It's crazy.
That's really interesting. Now, you're based in Israel. You've worked with a lot of companies over there and in the U.S. Do you see the same kind of attitude towards content marketing in both countries? Is there any difference?
I think Israelis are generally more skeptical or sarcastic or cynical. I don't know what word you want to use. But I think it's changing. I think, now Israeli companies are getting it. They're starting to get it. Listen, there are a lot of differences between Israel and Silicon Valley or other ecosystems. But when it comes to marketing, I just think, I always say the difference between sales and marketing is one word, and it's a word that actually does not exist in the Hebrew language, and that is subtlety, right? Marketing is subtle, and Israelis are not subtle people, and that's why the word subtlety does not exist in their language, but that is marketing. And so, it is a challenge when you're not a subtle person to do marketing that doesn't drive immediate ROI. If you're thinking short term, then go spend money on sales, go spend money on advertising, don't spend money on marketing, because that doesn't yield immediate results, but it does yield the most, significant result, and it does move the needle more than anything else.
That makes sense. Was there a point in your career when you looked around and you noticed, most companies aren't doing this? Most startups are not investing in content marketing. Like, was that kind of an aha moment that inspired you to become a strategic advisor?
I like to pretend it did, but it didn't happen like that. It started because many, many years ago, I was sitting at my first job. I was bored out of my mind, and I just thought to myself, I love tech. I love writing. I'm just going to start writing on the internet. Today, we call it a blog. That wasn't a thing back then. It definitely wasn't a business model. There was no SEO. It was a diary from my perspective. Entrepreneurs started to reach out. I'd meet with them, and I'd try to help, with anything pertaining to building a business, right? Because these guys are amazing at building tech, but competitive analysis, market research, the ability to communicate in an effective way, like literally none of it. So I started to help these guys, and one thing led to another. Then they started to pour into my inbox and say, now we're a big company. You helped us early on. Let's work together. And just literally, just in the most organic, natural, absolutely accidental way, this business just kind of got built.
Wow, it's a very cool journey that you took to get there. So there are publishing houses, there are tech review blogs, places like that run into this issue of how much money they're investing in their content versus what they're getting out. There's places that, they got to get on the YouTube treadmill or whatever, put it at a certain amount of time. And even those companies, like the official, tech blogs, sometimes face the challenge of the spend versus what they're getting out of it. How do you convince a startup founder or an early stage company to invest in that when even some, publishers are having issues understanding the return on investment they're getting?
Well, first of all, the return on investment of a publisher is usually advertising, right? That's not the return on investment for a startup. So first of all, I don't think there's any comparison, but I actually don't think the investment's so significant, right? In other words, you have, presumably every startup has a marketing team, right? Whether it's a marketing manager, a director of marketing, a VP marketing, or CMO, whatever. So instead of that person, individual, going and spending money on, billboards and ads in the New York Times, they should be spending time. It's not a question of money. It's a question of time, producing industry content. And so, I don't think in 2023 it requires much convincing, because you look at every single leading brand, they're all doing content, right? So I think people get it. I think people are scared of it, right? There's a barrier. Right? I'm scared to sit in front of the camera. I'm scared to get on audio. I'm scared to start writing. Maybe I'll make mistakes. It's scary. But once you get started, the results are quite obvious, and it's beyond traffic and clicks. It's more about, positioning the company as a significant player in the industry. And that can only be done through content. There's no, a billboard won't achieve that ever. You know what I mean? It's about the value that you give someone. And if you give people, your followers, real reason to follow and to engage, that's when you win them over, not because they saw some billboard on the highway.
Fair. Have you ever walked into a company with somebody you've been working with and you said, do the content marketing thing? They were skeptical and then they went for it. And then at the end of the day, you talked about $1 billion acquisition, right? What type of results, what kind of difference in results are you seeing in the companies that are actually taking this approach versus not?
First of all, I see pushback every day, like literally every day. I mean, I'm meeting startups every single day, and they're like, oh, this content thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can replicate an idea, right? If someone has an idea, like anybody could just rip off your idea. In fact, you can replicate technology. Technology today is, it's pretty much irrelevant if you think about it, right? What technology does Twitter have? What technology does Uber have? What technology does none of these guys have technology. And they don't have a unique idea either, right? Google was number 17 search engine in the world. It wasn't the idea. What you cannot replicate is a brand, right? If people love your brand and they actually feel strong emotion and sentiment toward your brand, a company could go spend $1 trillion. They will not be able to replicate that. And so that right there is one of the many, but one of the most fundamental reasons that companies should invest in brand, because that can't be ripped off. Everything else can be ripped off.
Right. And that's right now, Twitter users, or X, or whatever it's called today.
I'll never call it that, man. I'll never call it X. I can't.
It's hard. How long have you been on Twitter?
Wow. I don't know. 15 years? Something like that? Like
so say, days. I've been on 13, 14 years, right? I can't get used to it. But, we all saw Threads blow up, and everyone in their mother was blogging about how huge it is. And then, users just left immediately, right? Do you think part of the reason Twitter is doing okay right now is because, Twitter has all that brand affinity, so it changes to X. But Elon Musk's brand, do you think that's what's kind of driving that success?
No, I think that's a little oversimplifying it. I don't think one person can carry a company. I do think that he's done a lot right. He's done a lot of stupid things, but I'll just give you one on a personal level, and that is that, unfortunately, I'm at the forefront of anti-Semitism on X. I get tons of anti-Semitism. If you saw the tweets that I get on a regular basis, you would actually not believe it. And, over the years, I always got tons of it. In fact, Jack Dorsey personally tweeted me that he was going to handle, the abuse. But over the years, I've reported easily 10,000 accounts for anti-Semitism. 99% of them, I got an email back saying they did not violate the terms of service. But recently, since Elon Musk took over, I think I've had I think I've maybe reported, let's say 50 accounts, and I think over 40 of them were banned.
Wow.
So he's doing something right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really incredible. Yeah. Wow.
Listen, in his defense, this stuff was pure hate speech. There was no gray area here. It was just pure hate speech. Like, Hitler got it wrong. You and your should be in an oven. You can't debate that. That's pure hate speech. So, but I'm glad that they're actually doing something. They didn't used to do anything, and now they are. So I'm glad about that.
So, for anybody listening to just the audio podcast right now, Hillel is wearing a T-shirt with the emoji with the head exploding, and that is literally me right now. My head is exploding at just how extreme all of that is.
Crazy.
But back to the brand building. So in terms of interviews, so you've got your own podcast, and you blog everywhere, right? You're producing tons of content. If you're talking to somebody that's new in the content marketing space, they just got their CMO, maybe they're just starting to work on marketing. Where do you think they should start? What is that? You said interviews are high impact, but is that where they should just start?
There's no right answer to that question. It very much depends on the vertical in which the company operates. It very much depends on their resources. There's a lot of factors here. But assuming for 1 second they have the resources and the market in which they operate or the space is not insanely saturated in terms of content, then yeah, I think they should start with content. I think they should literally create a subdomain. If it's x.com/blog, and literally get to the office every day, make a cup of coffee, and pump out content about their industry on a daily basis, or even more than a daily basis, as often and consistently as they can. And on top of that, you build everything else. On top of that, you build social media. On top of that, you build, PR. On top of that, you build everything. So yeah, I 100% would say that that's the first thing you should do. And even more than that, I actually don't think companies should wait till they have a product to start, because once you have a product, you presumably should have an audience to download your product or to use your product. And if you start, building the marketing or building the content now when I have the product, I missed the train. Right? So you started 6 months ago. And again, that's a very common misconception amongst entrepreneurs. I don't have a product. How could I do marketing? That is 100%, nonsensical and just false. Start before you have a product.
I feel like you're describing what I'm doing right now. This whole conversation is just start before I have the product, do interviews. Don't mention we mentioned StartHub at the start of this, and I'll mention it at some point later. But But I'm doing everything you're saying to do.
See that?
This is incredible. I don't know if you knew what we were doing ahead of time, and you just came in and you're not just coming in to validate everything.
We should just tell everyone that you sent me a check. All right.
Okay. We can do that. That sounds great. Since we're talking about tech, what's big in tech is Discord. Where do you see Discord communities fitting into content marketing?
It's really interesting, and maybe I shouldn't admit this in public, but I do not use Discord. I feel like it came out of nowhere. Like, I just feel like I had not heard of it, and then all of a sudden everyone's talking about Discord. It's an interesting model, I think, building those communities. I have not used it, so I don't really have a very intelligent opinion on Discord, but I do know that it's just blowing up, and it's all anyone talks about, which is fascinating to me. But I think that there's tremendous value to having, a closed community, based on certain themes and topics. I think that's tremendous value. And I think, that really, I would say, creates kind of a sense of loyalty and intimacy, for lack of a better term. And so I think it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, it does seem to be. And I'm not a heavy Discord user, but right, it's like a chat room, right? So you're not publishing, you're more cultivating relationships, which makes it kind of an interesting thing. But you're not seeing a lot of the companies you're advising necessarily lean into it heavily. Like I don't hear about huge companies with Discord servers, right? It does seem more of a startup kind of thing.
Yeah, I've literally never used Discord once. I've met a couple of companies that were talking about how big they got on Discord, but yeah, maybe I should. I feel like it's unprofessional at this point that I haven't used Discord, so I probably should.
I mean, I do social media advising, and I'm not a TikTok guy, so sometimes there's just a bridge you can't cross, right?
Wait, hold on a second. You're not on TikTok?
I can't do it. It's too addictive.
Okay, but you've gotten your feet wet.
I've seen TikTok videos, yeah, for sure, but I know
it is amazing.
I had to get rid of Instagram because just that threw 4 or 5 reels at me. And the next thing I know, 60 minutes has gone by and then there's all my attention, And I've heard, all I hear about TikTok is the algorithm is so smart. You're going to be addicted. You're going to be on there for 4 hours at a time. And
100%. But I'll tell you, listen, I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, it really is unbelievable what they did because, my Twitter feed is full of garbage that I do not want to see. And every other feed of every other platform, same thing. And all of a sudden on TikTok, you say to people TikTok, they just automatically associate it with little girls dancing. And yet when you open my TikTok, all you're going to see, are things that interest me, whether it's, tech, whether it's cars, whether it's NBA, whether it's Family Guy, it's just stuff that I like. It's just amazing how the algorithm truly got to know me and just served me the things I want to see. It's amazing.
I did once talk to a content creator who said, just make videos on TikTok because I was kind of worried. I'm like, what if the US bans TikTok, right? Which is within the realm of possibility, I think. And he just said, look, you're learning video production skills. You're learning how to create good content. You put it on Instagram later or put it somewhere else. So it's a good way to kind of practice creating content, right?
Yeah. By the way, I also think TikTok has the highest barrier. In other words, you can just pick up a phone and just, join Facebook. Pick up a phone, join Twitter. You can't just pick up a phone and start posting on TikTok. You got to be creative. And, I'll admit right now, I have a hard time with that. For the first time ever in my career, I actually paid someone to manage my TikTok. I've never paid anyone to manage any of my social, but I realize how important TikTok is. And I just know that I'm just too old for this stuff. I'm just not as creative as these kids. And so I'm paying someone to do it for me.
That's really interesting. So any social media platform you jump on, any blog, you're kind of just putting what's in your head on the page. You think it translates reasonably well, but on TikTok, there's a particular approach you need to take to be successful?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that the barrier is much, much, much higher. And, if you're not creative, you're going to get nowhere on TikTok versus other platforms that I could tweet something and, it doesn't, no creativity, just whatever, a thought. And it will go crazy, and same thing on LinkedIn, same thing on Facebook, but with TikTok, you gotta step it up.
Very interesting. All right. Well, you're working with, again, neither of us have counted, but it's many, many dozens of startups right now. What are you most excited about when you walk into a meeting and you're just like, let's talk about this thing I'm super pumped about these days?
You're saying in terms of type of technology?
Oh gosh, in terms of, where you think you can have the most impact with startups, the thing they can do the most that just gets you excited, here's a new shiny thing they should chase, whether it's integrating AI technology or usually a certain type of content marketing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I sometimes you got to go back to the roots. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Da Vinci famously said that, and Steve Jobs famously stole it. For me, it's about communication. What excites me is sitting with a startup, them telling me what they think they've done, what they think they're doing, and then me taking it and throwing it back in their face and them saying, how did I not think of that? Like I spoke to a company yesterday, I'm not going to name the name, but whatever, they work in the food tech industry. And, they're like, yeah, we're a food tech company. And I was like, no, what you're doing is actually not just building tech for food. What you're doing is what Uber did to transportation and what Airbnb did to hospitality, which is you are taking food and democratizing it. You no longer have to be a chef to create amazing food. You no longer have to be a cab driver to drive someone, right? And so I said to them, you guys are actually changing the whole paradigm of cooking, right? And so, I said this to the founder, and he looked at me like, oh my God, how did I not think of that? That's what excites me. I love doing that. I love sitting with entrepreneurs who have built remarkable tech, but are not able to communicate it in a way that the normal person, quote unquote, can understand why this is valuable and why I should care.
Yeah, a lot of companies talk about value. And so you see companies as just missing the actual value that they're providing because they have one thing in their head and they're like, well, we think we're doing this.
It's not even that. They don't even focus on value, right? Because a lot of times, let's say the founder's an engineer and he or she thinks like an engineer. And so when I say to them, what do you do? They'll answer me about their algorithm. And I'm like, dude, your algorithm is not what you do. That's what you built. What do you do? And they do a lot of times do not understand the differentiation between what you do and what you built. To them, what they built is what they do. And then it's just not true. So it's not even a question of, let's call it taking the value that they think they're providing and changing it. It's about focusing on what value they're actually bringing to this world, right? Because your algorithm is just not interesting to anyone. You know what I mean? So it's stop focusing on what you do and what you've built and your tech stack. No one cares. Just tell me why I should care. It's just a simple concept. That's what excites me.
That resonates way too deeply with me. I'm working with a startup friend of mine who built this amazing proprietary thing that lets you deliver 4K video to some people, but you can gate it, and then you only deliver 1080p video to other people. And I'm like, how do you even explain this in a sentence or two, first of all? And then second of all, who cares? Who needs that, right? Like what box is that checking that needs to solve? So
right.
I'll share this conversation with him, and we'll talk about that. So in addition to all the work you do with startups, you do a lot of public-facing stuff. I know there's a million projects, but people can read more about you on hillelfuld.com, which we'll put a link to in the show notes. They can also hit you up on social. Where do you like people to find you the most?
So the answer is everywhere, right? I think I'm everywhere. If you're, it depends on your definition. Are you asking me where I get the most engagement? Are you asking me where I spend the most time? Are you asking me where I enjoy most?
What do you enjoy most?
From a consumption side, definitely TikTok, no question about it. But if you want to reach me or you want to follow my work, then I wouldn't say TikTok's the best place. I would probably say LinkedIn. But if you want to know Hillel the person, not only Hillel the professional, then Twitter.
Oh, okay. So Twitter is where you get more personal than professional.
Yeah. And Facebook, super personal. Like if you really want to know about my kids and whatever, then Facebook for sure.
Wow, that is terrific. Well, it's really cool that you're like, put yourself out there so much. What is next for you? Like, is there a next big initiative you've got? Your podcast is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you've seen Wayne's World. It's a terrific movie. and
did your research?
Well, yeah, dude. I just watched that movie with my wife like a month and a half ago. So
awesome.
It's funny enough. But it's a really great show. So people should check that out. What is the name of the podcast for everybody?
Bootstrap. BootstrapPod.com.
Awesome. And it's very chill. And like one of the number one ways to grow a podcast is to mention it on other podcasts. So I was surprised you didn't come out the gate with that. You sent me some notes early and I was like, what about the podcast?
I mean, because if I'm going to start plugging, like I have my vlog, I have my podcast, I have my writing, I have my social, where do you stop? I'm just like, I'm not a big believer in self-promotion. I don't think it's effective at all. But anyway, that's a different discussion for another time.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, then forget whatever Hillel said about where to find him. I will wrap up with a bunch of calls to action for where you can find him. And I will do the promoting for you. How's that?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. These were great insights. I think anybody working in the startup ecosystem will agree that it's really interesting to learn about the huge impact that content marketing can have and how much of an emphasis they should put on it. So thanks for sharing your wisdom, and we are very much looking forward to sharing this with our audience.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
The Funding Blueprint is brought to you by StartHub. This episode was produced by me, Cody Goff, with audio and video editing by Sean Patel. If you're looking for sound design or audio video production work, get in touch with Sean at seanpatel.com. You can watch The Funding Blueprint on YouTube or Spotify, or listen on any other podcast app. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, then please open up the Funding Blueprint, scroll down to where you can rate the show, and tap 5 stars to leave a quick rating. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining, and have a great week.